Welcome to Your Health is Wealth podcast. The podcast invites you to embrace the profound truth that your health is your wealth. I'm your host, Kristen Burke. This podcast aims to take you on a journey into the landscape of alternative medicine, integrative practices, and holistic healing options that empower you to thrive in mind, body, and spirit. Today in our segment titled Episode 6, Invisible Struggles, Visible Strength, a dentist's journey through epilepsy, acceptance, and advocacy. We will be exploring the remarkable journey of Amee, a dedicated dentist who has faced challenges of epilepsy with incredible resilience and grace. Epilepsy is a neurological condition characterized by recurrent seizures affecting about 3.4 million people in the U.S. Despite its prevalence, epilepsy often remains an invisible struggle, with many individuals facing not only the physical challenges of the condition, but also the mental health aspects that it comes with. The stigma and misconceptions surrounding epilepsy can exacerbate feelings of isolation and anxiety, making the journey even more difficult. Dr. Amee Shah, her experience with epilepsy began at the age of 8, which started a lifelong journey of managing her condition while pursuing her dreams. We'll explore how her journey has influenced her professional life, the importance of acceptance and self-care, how she has used her voice to raise awareness and foster understanding. We'll also discuss the broader impact of epilepsy on mental health in America, where societal pressures and cultural stigmas can make it difficult for individuals to seek help and support. We welcome our guest today, Dr. Amee Shah. Amee is a dedicated healthcare professional in Chicago. Beyond her professional achievements, she is a passionate mental health advocate and openly shares her personal journey living with epilepsy. Dr. Shah is a powerful voice for those who cannot speak for themselves, working to raise awareness and foster understanding about mental health and invisible illnesses. Her dedication to advocacy and her professional experience makes her a respected figure in both the medical and mental health communities. Amee, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited about this conversation.
Me as well. Let's start off with you sharing a little bit about your journey with epilepsy and how it influenced both you professionally and personally.
Okay. I was first diagnosed at the age of 8 is when I had my first seizure. I am very attached to my parents, and I was sleeping in their room that night. And luckily, it was a blessing in disguise. And they were able to realize something was not right. We called 911, had access to care, and did all the testing, the MRIs, the scans. Everything came back negative, inconclusive. I lived in a small town. So at that point, they directed us to a pediatric neurologist who was about an hour and a half away. And from there, we went over the testing, and we were put on a medication. That medication has worked for me my entire life. And I've run into a little bit struggle of it recently, but professionally, it hasn't stopped me from doing anything. This is something I've had since I was 8, and now I am in my 40s. And it's just something I'm starting to talk about this many years later. And so for my listeners out there, I really want them to know, whether it's epilepsy or a chronic illness or anything that's invisible, don't automatically undermine your capabilities or what you're able to do. And professionally, it doesn't affect what I do on a day-to-day basis. My team members are aware of it. I work with my husband. We have our own practice, and I'm very fortunate.
You're demonstrating mind over, right? So yes, of course, we have challenges in life, and epilepsy can be debilitating for some. It really depends to the extent of the type of seizures. I would imagine you're going to go into that as we get into the podcast. there's a testament to your strength in your mind on, I realize I have this challenge in my life and it can affect mental health, but here's where I'm moving forward. I'm going to take this and I'm going to integrate that within myself and try to overcome it and teach others. With the advocacy, I'm really glad that you are able to help others through your own journey. There are many studies out there that show that mental health can be the actual core root cause for most physical illnesses, diseases, imbalances, however you want to look at it, right? So the fact that you're also have a focal point on mental health, I think is really important because we know that if our mind is in more of a balance, it's going to help support the physiology. So being a passionate advocate for mental health and invisible illnesses, and can you, before we go further, can you define what it is to have an invisible illness?
An invisible illness is something that you cannot see. It could be mental health, it could be anxiety, it could be Parkinson's, bipolar. We can see certain illnesses when people are walking around with canes or crutches. There's something going on, but behind closed doors, what is someone going through? We can't see that. You walk into a grocery store, my patients come to see me, and there are not things I can see. And that we come across that every single day. And we come across people who are dealing with things behind closed doors, taking medications, working on their own different strategies to maintain almost homeostasis within their bodies. And they're not talking about it.
So I think what you're saying is there's no obvious signs or symptoms that are visible to people that are around them. They seem to be functioning okay, but internally, that's where they're being affected. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, how did your experience shape your commitment to this advocacy?
I was victim to this. I had done this my entire life. You put on the front, you do all the things. I show up to all the places, including work and school and my family and all these events. And what is that representing to someone out there who may be going through the same thing? And I have two kids. And at some point, I had to wake up and say, what am I modeling here? Because what I used to wear as a badge of honor, because I think that hustle culture and being able to do it all and hiding really what's going on and not talking about it has been glorified. And so this was my way of coming out to be an example and reaching out to anyone who may be listening, who may be going through the same thing in some way, shape, or form, where you have to show up, but then inside you're home struggling and you're taking medications and you're trying to find resources that can help you, but we're just not having these conversations.
That has to be incredibly exhausting to hold all of that inside. Show this picture of yourself as being what you may imagine as the perfect person, holding down the perfect job, doing all of the same things that you would imagine you should be doing, and internally struggling, whether it's mental health and or the epilepsy. Can you share a little bit about that?
Yeah, I didn't struggle with it so much until this year. And the medications were working and eye opening this year, where I was like, okay, I've been doing this my whole life, but why is it in my face now? And I've really had to sit down with myself and accept it almost. This many years later, I don't think I was put in the situation of acceptance. And until you get to that point of acceptance, it's very difficult to talk about and to reach out and to find help. We are trained to show up and be certain places, present ourselves a certain way hold up commitments that we've made to our friends and our family members. But when you can't, you realize this was actually a blessing in disguise to me, where I had to take the pause and I had to sit down and listen to my body physically and emotionally. And it was time not to cover it up. There were a few situations where I lied to my own friends about why I didn't go to dinner. And that really made me stop and think that night, these are my friends. This is my support system. What good am I doing for myself by not reaching out to them? And so a lot of it is accepting it yourself and then talking about it. It doesn't keep me from doing my job. It doesn't keep me from being able to be there for my kids. But guess what? On those days where which is, they are more challenging, there is a support system.
When you talk about showing up and acceptance of your own situation, that's having trust and faith that others will accept you for who you are. And I feel like people will mirror us. So if we accept ourselves, others will feel that authenticity, that truth. When you live in your truth and you speak your truth, that resonates with others. They pick up on that and they're going to treat you as such. It's when we seem to have some of the challenges in our mind, because usually that's where it starts with, I'm not going to be accepted or I'm not going to be good enough ish, those feelings.
Yeah.
And people start to treat us as such. I do believe there's a balance, though, on who you share information with and how much information in the context thereof.
And that is what's difficult. And I still have difficulties in how much to share versus what can I not share or what shouldn't I share? What's too much for people? But then you have to sit back and say, I am who I am. I didn't sign up for this. What is too much? And who is that too much for? What am I holding back for? And who am I holding it from? At the end of the day, it comes down to me and accepting me and myself. And until I was able to do that is when I was able to talk about it. And I hope that resonates with other people. And it's not limiting. And you can use that as empowerment instead of a victim. This for me has been a source of empowerment. And that's what I want to relay to somebody else who may be going through the same situation and kind of on the fence of there is a how much is too much. And that can be a different conversation, but owning your truth and being who you truly are and being accepted by those who are going to accept you is all you need because everything and everyone else is just extra. And you realize what's important and who's important. And I think the lesson has been greater for me personally than the limitations or the epilepsy or the mental health is I have learned a lot about myself and how I want things and the way I think moving forward.
And I think that's the point. I think
Yeah.
that's why these types of things pop up in our lives to give us tools in our tool belt. Because what you've learned with empowerment is the process of surrendering to the situation instead of trying to control it. When we try to control things around us, usually that doesn't end well.
Yep.
There's different degrees of that, of course, but you've learned that through that process. And that's the point. We don't show up in the world and we're perfect and we've made it. It's going to be process and there's going to be growth our entire life. There is
Yep.
no end point that we're trying to get to. I think that it helps to set goals, but if we get too fixated on that, that can distract us the actual here and now, the moment. I think that's terrific that you have had that. I've had my own experiences with other things and it resonates with me. And I'm pretty sure it resonates with many that are listening to this podcast right now. With acceptance, it's a crucial step in managing various types of chronic conditions, not just epilepsy. So this interview today, I'm hoping that it is a process that you can share with anybody, regardless of what they're going through. Can you talk about when you were going through that and how you were changing? How did it impact your family, whether it's your parents or your husband and your children?
I had never talked about it before, even with my own children, my husband. It was never anything that was brought to surface because we were living the hustle culture and we were doing our day to day. And there was no reason for us to take the pause. My immediate family has also known. They live in different states and we're spread all over. And it was just the normal. We meet for vacations a couple times a year and life is fine. And when you stop and you take a step back and realize this is just a part of being human. And until you are in a situation or you face a challenge like this, it makes you take a step back and realize this is your support system. Now, whether it's something as small as I need to make a decision on what pair of shoes to buy, or it's something big where I just need someone to listen. You have a support system. And if you don't, come reach out to me, find somebody to talk to. I have gained so much information about my own condition and relating to other people through sharing my journey.
And sharing can be a powerful way to connect other resources, right? You talked about immediate resources around your family. It sounds like you have a pretty good sphere of that. Tell me about other resources that are out there that you discovered as you were starting to share your story. I would imagine people were reaching out to you that had similar types of experiences.
Absolutely. So I first shared my story with a friend of a friend back in 2009 when I was pregnant with my first child. I was going through this alone. I had quit working. It was my husband and I going through it. We had gone through medication changes with the intention of having a child. You may or may not know the medication that I was previously taking has a high rate of birth defects. It was very intentional. We were going to change the medication. We knew we were going to go into the world of an unknown. You just don't know, right? And we had intentionally decided to take that risk. And while I was going through that, I had quit working, which was fine. And I mentioned to this friend who works in the field of neurology, this is what's going on and this is what we've been going through. And it was the first time that I had talked about it. And she is the one who directed me to my current neurologist 16 years later, who helped me navigate having two beautiful children that I have today. And had I not spoken up and just something in me felt that day to share that with her, had I not felt that or made that connection with her, I may or may not have come across this physician and this wonderful resource that has guided me and who still currently currently continues to guide me to new options of treatments and testing and pushes me to do these tests that I just did that are out of my comfort zone. And it's been really nice. So I encourage you to do the same because you never know what you're going to learn. And honestly, you have nothing to lose.
That was beautifully said. You have such a positive energy about you that I know folks that do struggle with epilepsy. I don't have epilepsy, so I can only imagine. But the fact that this is such a huge shift in your life, especially you were able to manage it for so many years and it was just there, but it wasn't there, right? It wasn't in your face, like you said. And then it shows up as a blessing, according to you, to help you look at things from a different perspective. I do know that sometimes there can be impact how invisible or chronic illnesses are perceived, and specifically on how they're managed, right? Not everybody has the tools to manage them the same way. How have cultural implications affected your experience with epilepsy and mental health?
Yeah, I'll just put it out there. I'm 43 years old. I've had this since I was 8. Now, I don't remember ever being told, sorry, this headphones are going to go back in again.
Okay, we're keeping it real here.
We are keeping it real. That's just what's happening today. These headphones are not cooperating, but
We're living
that's
in the
okay.
moment. We're
That's
good.
okay. That's
That's
life. They're back in. We're going to keep moving.
See, you just overcame a
I did. No big deal.
small little obstacle. No big deal.
No big deal. No big deal. I've been diagnosed since I was 8, and I've never been told, don't say anything. No one has ever said that to me. Don't tell anyone about this condition. We don't want anyone to know. But there was just something innately in me where I just didn't share it. And I think that's where the stigma comes in. I think a lot of invisible illnesses and chronic illnesses can be stigmatized, and people are not aware that every invisible illness, chronic illness looks and presents differently to every person. And you really have to have a conversation with that person to know what exactly the presentation is for them. We hear one term and we hear a blanket statement. Okay, you saw a movie where somebody had epilepsy and they automatically fell to the ground and they were having convulsions. And yes, that is one way that it can present. But that blanket statement does not apply to the general term or diagnosis of epilepsy. And that, I assume, is spread across the board with mental health, anxiety, depression. All of those are going to present and be managed differently in every person. We just don't know their story and we don't know their experience. And if we don't know that, we don't know how to support them. So culturally, it was just shoved under the rug. And I just didn't want that to continue any longer. And I was in a situation where I needed my support, and the only way I could get it was to speak out about it. And so in my story, I was really put in a corner because I was just reaching out to, I can't do this hustle culture, and I'm not going to lie about it. That's not the role model that I would like to be for my children or anyone else in the next generation or anyone going through the same thing. There's no need to do that. And culturally, when you talk about it, you can educate, and that's where the awareness starts. And it starts from one person and one person at a time. So the more people that talk about it, the more awareness is spread and the more we are all educated.
Education, communication, which bridge the gap in so many aspects of life. And when we look at the cultural implications, I'm also curious, do you happen to know, and I'm putting you on the spot, and if you don't know, I'll definitely research this. And if I can find answers, I'll post it as a research link after the podcast. Do you know if there's a higher incidence with women versus men with epilepsy?
I do not know
Okay.
specifically between men and women. I do know overall it's 1 in 26. That's a high number. How many times have any of us walked into a room with more than 26 people?
Right.
It could be a classroom, it could be a wedding. 1 in 26, that means how many people have it, we just don't know, or struggle with it, and we just don't know because it's not talked about. I've been the 1 in 26 for 35 years because I haven't talked about it. And it just puts things in perspective of how many other chronic illnesses, invisible illnesses are people struggling with that they're hiding behind because of a stigma, a cultural stigma, societal stigma, fear of judgment, right? Those are all the reasons why I hadn't spoken about it. Fear of judgment, my inabilities versus my capabilities. I'm the only one that can make that judgment of my inabilities versus my disabilities or things I can and cannot do. but it's not talked about because you worry about what other people think their implications are of my life and what I deal with. And I just really encourage and want to empower everyone to this is about you. This isn't about anybody else. And the minute you get to those terms, it is so liberating. And you're able to take that awareness into empowerment and education and use it as a trickling effect in a positive way through your journey.
I've researched that the core issue with many illnesses, like I was referring to before, is mental health.
Yeah.
Usually the root cause even of mental health is trauma, PTSD, and stress. Do you know if there's a connection between that and the epilepsy?
Absolutely. I think the correlation to mental health and isolation and depression is should be talked about more and educated more about than the condition itself, because the condition people have lived with, and there are doctors and they're seeking treatments and they're working on ways to manage that. But nobody talks about the fear and the shame and the guilt that comes along that's held in that is from not talking about it. And I myself, it was the same thing. Why am I, when this hit me in the beginning of the year, it was more a mental health kind of struggle of it's a kind of downward spiral. One affects the other, and then it comes back and affects your epilepsy, right? Because stress, if you look at the triggers of epilepsy, stress is one of them. What causes stress? Everything you're thinking about, everything you're trying to do by yourself, everything that your thoughts are putting in your head. So it's a lot of rewiring the way you think. And that, in my experience, has helped me conquer and manage the epilepsy. So the correlation, I think, is very direct and very prevalent.
I'm really interested in this right now because I am studying Ayurveda and we are looking at a lot of immunological diseases right now, is what the focal point is. But it could be any chronic illness. Everything always goes back to mental health, specifically trauma, PTSD, and stress. And that's why I'm asked that question about epilepsy and the percentage of women versus men, because we're seeing a higher incidence of women overall with physical illnesses and diseases than men, specifically related to immunological disease, autoimmune disease, like lupus, rheumatoid arthritis. And so I'm curious and I always want to dive deeper. Why? And I did find a couple of studies that talk about women overall have a different layers of stress than men. When we walk down the street at midnight, we would have different worries than a male would, right?
Absolutely.
And the other thing is, I think the socioeconomical aspect, I don't know if it plays a huge role as much as the physical aspect of fear. But just looking at that, if that can create more stress and trauma, and we're seeing a higher incidence of a certain category, could that also be related to this too? And which then, of course, I went down a rabbit hole. And I'm sharing this with you because I'm planting a seed in hopes that someone out there that's listening to this might have an answer. Is we put a lot of money into genomic testing as to research to find causation, but also to try to cure. Why aren't we taking some of those dollars and putting them into mental health when we already know that's the core issue with most illnesses? I just thought I would bring that up, especially for you as an advocate. And as you cross paths with some of these folks that may have some of these answers, or perhaps maybe this could bring awareness to shifting and funding with supporting more of the mental health aspects of illness, whether it's epilepsy, autoimmune, or other chronic disease. That was a talking point that I wanted to mention. which kind of shifts into the other area of mindset and perspective. As we're going through this, clearly you have a really strong mindset. You mentioned that changing your mindset can alter your perspective, how you're looking at things, and can help you on how to move forward. Can you elaborate about how shifting your thoughts and attitudes influenced your journey in recovery? And do you have like a practical stepwise approach that you would be willing to share?
Y- Yeah, stepwise, it's hard to say, but there are a few key points that I have really focused on. And it has not been what I can do. I could sit and ruminate in all of I used to be able to go out till 1 a.m., but now sleep is very important. So I need to be home by 10. Well, guess what? I'm very grateful that I could go have that dinner. And it's probably better for me at my age that I need to be in bed at 10 o'clock. And so it's looking for the gratitude and it's looking for the things that I can do versus the things that I cannot do. And through that, it's having control of your body. That's the other thing is movement has always been a big part of my life, working out, running, walking, and whatever that looks like to you, focus on your cans. I'm very grateful I was able to get a workout in for me. That helps me mentally. That helps me physically. And I could sit there and ruminate in all of these things and this journey, then all the negatives. But when you pull yourself out of that and you just wake up and you're like, gosh, let me focus on what I can do today and my plans are today. And then give yourself some grace because sometimes you can't do everything that you had planned when you woke up that day. And that's the reality of it. But that's where grace comes in. So it's focusing on what you can do and allowing yourself grace for those moments where you cannot. And those have been probably two of my biggest pillars of what I focus on through the day. And not explaining yourself to anyone unless they're asked for an explanation. And so I've been very selfish this year. And I say that with pride. I don't say that negatively anymore. Before it would be like, oh, I'm sorry, I just have to be self. But now it's like, I need to be selfish because I put myself first. Because if I don't take care of my well being and my health, I cannot be there for other people. And those are my top three. And that's my process waking up every day, focusing on what I can do, doing a full body scan of how did I sleep last night and how is that going to affect what I can do the rest of the day, reaching out to my support system if that's needed that day. And that can look different every day, but without talking about it, you don't have that support system there. And so now that it's out there and we've talked about it, I can rely on them. If I wake up one day and be like, I'm just really tired, it was a long night, whatever it may be. And gratitude, gratitude for the things that I have, that I've been given, and the things I can do have played a huge important part. And it took me sitting down on my butt to be able to really stop and take a time out in life to even give myself the opportunity to bring that in and bring those thoughts in. Otherwise, hustle culture will continue.
To summarize, gratitude, being in tune with your own body, right? Taking that moment to check in and go, what do I need? And putting yourself first. I think that's really important because no one else is going to be able to take care of you. They're not going to know what you need.
Right.
And if you're not able to have that time to yourself to be able to reflect and feel into that, then, like you said, you're going to continue down the old path. And that is a form of neglect for your body. And then that's what brought that sign to you in the first place, is what it sounds like. But you also know that if you need to, you can reach out to your safety net.
Right.
And that helps to reemphasize that. Put your own oxygen mask before you help other people, balancing that time. That's allowed you to focus on your core values and what you want to leave behind, especially with your journey and sharing with others. How did this period of reflection impact your goals and priorities? And did those change?
They did change. And the time I allowed to sit and reflect on the journey, I realized I needed to pause and really appreciate what was important. Because with the medications and everything that I was going through, my energy levels were lower. I only had a certain amount of energy per day. I could no longer be energized or bunny, be in 10 places at once. And it just wasn't physically possible. And I had to do that body scan to check in with myself. Now, what I found is really holding space for the things that are important, and everything else is just extra. And you can still do it all. You just don't have to do it all at once. It's maintaining that balance. And I haven't let anyone down, I don't think, but it's very nice to be able to say, hey, I can't today, but maybe this weekend, or I can't today, but I'll prioritize that on a different day next week. Because today, these are already my top three priorities. And everyone understands. And I wish I had done that sooner instead of feeling like you have this checkbox and you have to do it all. And you don't.
I love that quote. You can do it all. You just don't have to do it all at once. So that's based on prioritization.
Yeah.
It's easier said than done, obviously. And I think especially with people who tend to be more on the type A, I can do it all. Let's do it all at
Right.
once. And that has to create an enormous amount of stress when you
Right.
can't do things in the way that you used to be able to operate. But what it actually did was it made things more efficient
Mhm.
because it forced you to prioritize through that process of growth that you may not have done otherwise. What it sounds like to me.
Yeah. And that's why I still look back on this journey that I'm on. I wouldn't even say on my past journey, it's a continued journey. And it's been a blessing. It really has, because the things that I've learned and the way I approach things are different in the best way possible. And I hope as I continue through this journey, it only gets better.
What advice would you be giving to individuals who are struggling with accepting their condition? Because you talked about how the importance of acceptance.
Mhm.
So, what advice would you give them? And also, how to find the courage to ask for help?
So I would just like to say, I mean, every challenge is an opportunity.
Mm.
It's an opportunity for growth. It tests your resiliency, which you realize you have it in there. Sometimes you just have to be forced to dig really deep to find it. And leveraging your community, because there is a community out there. You have to tap into it by speaking about it. And you don't have to do this alone.
Looking ahead, what are your goals for continuing your advocacy work? And how do you hope to further raise awareness and foster understanding about mental health and
Yeah.
invisible illnesses?
Yeah. So what I would like to see is one, a small Instagram page where I've shared my journey because I didn't want to lie about it anymore. And I am here to support anybody at any time. You can reach me, send me a message. As far as further goals down the road, I would also like to form smaller group sessions where people feel most comfortable in small group settings, where we're able to sit together and listen to each other's stories and support each other. If you don't have someone you want to entrust in, or sometimes you don't want to go to your friends, sometimes it's easier to talk to a stranger, whether it's a therapist or support groups. And so I hope to be able to form support groups in small situations that enable people to talk. Just talk about something you feel wouldn't you something you wouldn't feel comfortable talking about somewhere else that you've been holding in,
I think
because you're not alone.
that's a really good idea. And I've been talking and interviewing various people of all ages,
Mhm.
women, professional women, younger ages, older, college students. And the one area that I'm hearing that's a commonality of need is group support, but not in a space where rumination occurs. It's just more of here are some challenges that I'm experiencing with work or getting to work or
Yeah.
communication. How do I articulate this? And just sharing those daily, what may appear to be a challenge, but actually it's a blessing, right?
Yeah.
And how to overcome that. It's a lesson. It's a lesson in life, in their daily life, that they actually can apply to multiple things. So I do think that you're on the right path with that. There is a huge need from what I'm hearing. Do you see an opportunity of multiple types of providers to collaborate care? So, for example, you know that because mental health is a root cause for this, if you were to have a nurse or a doctor or a holistic care provider who specializes in epilepsy, a mental health advocate or provider, someone who has experienced epilepsy, I think that's important to have that person at the table to come together in one of these smaller social groups or sessions so that people can show up and have that conversation. Do you think that would work in this
I think
area?
that would be an immense opportunity for anyone going through this. And even as educators and even as professionals, to see it from different standpoints, because you don't know what you don't know, right? Your field of expertise, whatever that may be. You see the neurologist and you see an epileptologist, which is a specialist of a neurologist, which I think is very important. So you've got to be your own advocate and seek out different resources. But I was amazed at how much it all intertwines.
Yeah.
And if we could just get information, even as providers from other providers, I think that's a huge step moving forward because you don't see as much of that as I would like to see.
I agree with you. And I've done research on the complementary alternative medicine market itself. And it's just surprising with Western medicine doctors, they're trained a certain way. And I'm not speaking for all, by the way, just many that I've come across or that I've communicated with, that I actually know a lot of them who sometimes dabble in functional medicine, which is a little different than integrative itself. But they're interested in integrative medicine. But many of the clients and patients they have are afraid to share with them some of the holistic care providers they go to because they think they're not agree with the approach. For example, if they're going to a naturopath, if they're going to a certified Reiki specialist, or if they're going to someone who does sound therapy, for example, they're not licensed, but they do have some form of certification. And there are some studies that actually show that some of these modalities are really effective with the mind, right? Ayurveda, that's what I study. I think you just nailed it. Challenges create opportunity. And how we connect is through each other, is through communication and education. Communication and education on what is perceived challenge, which creates an opportunity for growth. And I do know this, that when we focus in on the inside with our health, our outside will reflect that. And these collaborative approaches are going to streamline healing. And I think you're onto something with a small group sessions. Is there a particular message or piece of advice that you would like to leave with the listeners, especially for those who are not only dealing with epilepsy itself, but mental health and any other type of chronic disease?
Absolutely. And the biggest takeaway that I've learned is talk about it and you'll realize you're not alone. And once you realize you're not alone, you will be directed in the right way for resources. There are a lot of resources, whether that's a single person that's your neighbor who you never knew was going through the same thing, or that's a healthcare provider, or even just a healing specialist. You have so many resources, but you can't tap into them until we've talked about it.
Before we go, I'd like for you to be able to have the opportunity to share with people where they can find you, your Instagram handle, if you want to share that, any other social media or website.
Yeah. So right now I'm just on Instagram. My handle is behind the bendies. behind the bindis has a kind of a cultural significance to it because the bindi is the decorative dot that women typically used to mean you were married. Now it's just fun and it matches your outfit. So you do it. That kind of means it's a cultural significance of what we've been hidden behind and what the cultural stigma is. And the more you think about it, it's a societal stigma. It's not just cultural, it's beyond that. And so it's taking that off and really accepting your true self and sharing that with everyone because you didn't sign up for this. Nobody signs up for these challenges, but there are ways to overcome them. There are ways to manage them. And don't let anyone else's judgment keep you from taking care of you.
Don't let anybody else project their own fears onto you.
Exactly.
And that's happening a lot more today because there's
Yeah.
a lot going on in the world. So can you spell your Instagram handle for folks?
Yeah, it's behind Behind the Bindis Bindis.
Okay. Thank you so much. And lastly, with a bindi, it's here in the center of the forehead, but ironically, that is where the third eye is located
And it's
for our intuition,
it
right?
is
So I also think that tying your intuition through connecting your mind, body, and soul, that creates an opportunity for healing as well.
absolutely.
That's
Absolutely.
awesome. Thank you so much for being here today. This has just been eye-opening with some of the information that you've shared, a wealth of knowledge, especially being vulnerable and sharing your experience. You've learned a lot, you're teaching a lot, and the community impact is huge. And I'm honored for you to share your story on the Your Health is Well podcast today. Thank you so much, and love to have you back. If there's any other developments you have in the future, maybe we can collaborate.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. I was happy to run across what you're doing, and you're doing a great job of spreading awareness as well.
Thank you
This
so
is great.
much. Thank you. Namaste.
I'm gonna say,
As we wrap up today's episode, Amee's story stands as a powerful testament to the incredible strength and resilience of the human spirit. From her first seizure at the age of 8 to ongoing challenges of managing a chronic condition while navigating a demanding career, Amee's journey is an example of courage and determination. Her experience sheds light on how epilepsy, though often invisible, can significantly impact both personal and professional spheres of life. One of the most impactful lessons from our conversation is the importance of acceptance. This acceptance has not only facilitated better management of her health, but it's also opened up new avenues for opportunities and support. It's a powerful reminder that facing our challenges can lead to remarkable personal growth and deeper connections with others. Amee's advocacy work underscores a crucial point: the need to confront and dismantle cultural stigmas and misconceptions surrounding mental health and invisible illnesses. Her dedication to raising awareness and supporting others serves as an inspiring example of how sharing our stories can foster greater understanding and support within communities. For those of you tuning in, Amee's story is a moving reminder that you are not alone in your struggles. Whether you are managing a chronic condition or supporting someone who is, remember that resources, support systems, and communities are available to help. As Amee emphasized, prioritizing self-care, seeking support, and finding strength in vulnerability are essential steps in navigating these challenges. Furthermore, Amee highlighted the value of collaborative care, emphasizing how a synergistic approach that integrates Western medicine, holistic practices, and psychotherapy can significantly benefit patients dealing with chronic illness and mental health concerns. This holistic, one-on-one, and community-based approach can offer a more comprehensive support system. As we close, let's carry forward the message of resilience and collaboration. Each challenge presents an opportunity for growth and strength. Don't hesitate to share your story and seek support that you need. Until next time, take care of yourselves and each other. We are interested in feedback on our episodes and learning what topics you may be interested in. for future episodes. Please follow us on Instagram, Your Health is Wealth Podcast. Also, our website, yourhealthiswealth.com, and is spelled with a Z instead of an S, for yourhealthiswealth.com. The link to the website is also found on the Instagram bio as well. On our website, we list the episodes, and there is an online form where you can fill it out, share your feedback, ask questions, share input on future topics, and also contact us if you're interested in being featured on the podcast. Topic scope is related to health and wellness. Thank you very much for listening to our podcast today and look forward to more. Have a great day, everybody. Take care.